Today we're talking about when Atari unknowingly took on the Chinese Mafia and lost. For this story, we need to go back to the offices of Atari in 1982. It was a heady time. Atari was 5 years into the reign of Ray Kassar, who had taken over as CEO from Atari founder Nolan Bushnell. And if Bushnell was the hippie CEO, Kassar was the blue blood country club CEO. If Bushnell was the one that organized beer parties every Friday and looked the other way if the production line smelled of marijuana, Kassar was the CEO that came to work in a chauffeured company limousine and installed a dining room with an executive chef and waitstaff for Atari management. Naturally, Kassar clamped down on the unruly activity under Bushnell's leadership, and the company had 5 years of stunning growth. But in 1982, the cracks were beginning to show. Kassar's mercurial leadership style and dismissive attitude towards employees had led to mass defections of Atari talent, some of whom would go on to become Atari's biggest competition. And his hesitancy to release next-gen hardware led to Atari losing market share to the technologically superior Intellivision. Combined with the rapid increase of software competitors releasing cartridges for Atari's console, Atari was facing increasing losses from inventory that wasn't moving, games that were piling up in Atari warehouses. But from the outside, things couldn't look better, and in mid-1982, Kassar triumphantly announced the company reaching $1 billion in sales. To celebrate, Kassar decided that year's national sales meeting would move from its traditional location near Atari headquarters to the ritzy locale of Monte Carlo, where Kassar stayed in the exclusive and opulent world-class Hotel de Paris. Kassar liked living high on the hog back in the heyday of Atari, but of course, as we know now, those days were numbered, with the pending video game crash coming in the year ahead. But there was reason to be optimistic back then. In most ways, Atari was still number one, and they were finally working to release a new console, the Atari 5200. It was scheduled to debut in September of 1982. And by this time, a significant amount of Atari's manufacturing was happening in overseas production facilities in Asia. Atari Taiwan was producing 2600 consoles and games like Star Raiders and was gearing up production for the fast-approaching 5200. Overseeing Atari Taiwan was VP and General Manager Rick Krieger, and at a cocktail party celebrating a new plant, Kassar handed Krieger a memo he had received from another Atari exec containing accusations of profit skimming at Atari Taiwan, and it specifically named as the culprits Krieger and David Chu, who also worked at the plant. No doubt the accusation was a shock to Krieger. He was a long-time Atari employee, having been at the company almost as long as Kassar, and had overseen Atari's business in Taiwan since 1978. An investigation was launched, and they found that, curiously, David Chu's parents owned several supply companies from which Atari procured cabling for manufacturing. An audit showed that prices from the Chu suppliers fluctuated erratically and with no apparent reason. Krieger had apparently found the profit skimming. Krieger notified Atari's senior legal counsel, Skip Paul, and David Chu was promptly fired. His parents' supply companies had their contracts terminated. And that's when things got worse. Just weeks after Atari cut ties with the Chu family, Krieger learned that plant manager Ray Kunovich had been violently attacked with a lead pipe, putting Kunovich into the hospital with serious injuries. Atari management was obviously alarmed and suspected the attack could be a reprisal for firing Chu and his family's supply companies. Kassar ordered Krieger to post guards at the plant as well as at the homes of local Atari executives. However, just weeks later, another Atari man, James Fu, was assaulted, this time with a knife, and Fu was stabbed 7 times, putting him in the hospital with serious injuries. Atari was now in panic mode, with some suspecting that the Chu family could be part of the Triad, the Chinese Mafia. Krieger himself visited with the Chu family to discuss their conflict, and a trio of top Atari executives, including Skip Paul, flew in from California to meet with Taiwanese authorities. After these high-level meetings, things cooled down and production got back on track. Atari Taiwan was finally able to deliver its late first shipment of 5,000 Star Raiders cartridges to the U.S. But it wasn't over. Suddenly, one of the managers at the Atari plant was confronted by a local gang who took credit for the stabbing of James Fu and warned of potential future reprisals unless there was a settlement. At this point, Atari just wanted to be done with the crisis. The plant was behind production on Star Raiders cartridges, and critical deadlines for the 5200 console were looming. Atari decided to cut their losses and settle with the gang, agreeing to a cash payout of 100,000 Taiwan dollars. That equated to about 3,000 US dollars in 1982, which would be about $10,000 today. The Atari 5200 did miss its September launch date, but with the Taiwan plant back on track, it was able to deliver 900,000 consoles for the rescheduled launch in November. It was a minor anecdote in Atari history, but certainly a harrowing story for those involved. Of course, the 5200's late launch wasn't the console's only problem, and for Atari, the video game crash itself was just ahead, but those are stories for another day. If you like this little bit of video game history, we've got a lot more coming up. Please subscribe and give a thumbs up, and we'll see you here next time on Hero Journalism.